Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, featuring comedian, writer, actor, and old friend of mine, Jordan Carlos. Very excited to have him. Very excited to have you today, the day after Thanksgiving, if that's when you're listening to it. It's Black Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Get out there and get that shopping done. Seriously, get out there and be a consumer, a capitalist, and get those deals. That is exactly what my daughters and wife and mom are going to do. Meanwhile, I'm going to try to get my dad to watch World Cup soccer with me and not make fun of it. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and I want to thank everybody who reached out and sent me a message. I put a post up for subscribers yesterday that I lied. I wouldn't be posting a show on Thanksgiving. I thought I was going to be posting every day, but I didn't get to it. And I just get so many thoughtful responses, thankful to me, and that meant everything to me. Thank you so much for all of your really, really nice, kind words. It meant so much to me, and so I will continue on as a result. Folks, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, really, seriously, a great week, and I hope you're going to have a great weekend. We'll be back at the regular formatted schedule with new improvements next week. Very excited and looking forward to seeing you and hearing about your Thanksgiving. So without further ado, I'm getting to the conversation because Jordan Carlos is a very, very funny, smart comedian who I've known for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how or where we met, but it was definitely through comedy. We met at the clubs, and then later on when I was the warm-up comedian at the Colbert Report, my guest today began working there on air as Stephen Colbert's black friend. He also appeared as a panelist and reporter, and I think he was a writer as well, on The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, which is very, very cool. He went to Brown University, so he's an Ivy Leaguer. We talked a little bit about that. But he's done so much in the last several years as well. Films, TV shows, a podcast, a hit podcast, and so much more. His website is jordancarloscomic.com. Listen to his podcast, Adulting with Michelle Buteau. Get his album, The Blackest, and watch him in Freeform's Everything's Trash. Ladies and gentlemen, my very special guest today, it's comedian, writer, actor, Jordan Carlos. Yeah, Jordan Carlos is here, and I'm very excited. I've just told everybody about you, and I just want to talk a little bit about, I guess, where we met or how far we go back. But I'm psyched to have you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, it's a pleasure. I follow your show. I follow your success, your meteoric rise. It's really cool, man. Pete, it's good to see you you have the courage of your convictions. I love it. You've always had something to say, and I love that you chop it up about issues and keep it funny. And I think that's just really, really cool, man.
Thanks, man.
Also, you got a good home studio going.
Yes, this is a shed I built when I left Sirius, or they left me after 5 contracts, and then it was just over. And then I was like, right. What am I, what is my ideal? Now, I didn't go as far as a vision board because people told me that was hokey. But in my mind, I was like, I want to work in like a shed, like a outside little shed. I don't know why, but I always wanted that. So I built it. I built my vision.
You built is it a lean-to or a proper
I feel like you didn't believe I could build a full shed, and you're like, it must be a lean-to, right? You didn't do it must be a lean. There's an open side, right, Pete? No, this shed was actually prefabricated, and then I built I insulated it and did it. I had help.
You winterized it.
I winterized it.
You made it happen. That's great.
No, but it's
you want to do that.
What do you have an ideal space that you like to work in? You write for a show, you do a podcast, you're a stand-up, you do everything, but I feel like space matters.
Space does matter. So many things matter now, but space matters. And I do have an office to myself, which is basically just turned into a garage of sorts. Like my wife's like, you can't have this stuff. We're going to throw it out. I'm like, I'll put it in my office.
Nice.
So I have this office in hip Industry City. And Industry City is like this. It's a freaking mall of a neighborhood that is completely gentrified. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Do I have to do I have to kneel to an altar and apologize to like Jane Jacobs or something like that? Anyway, the point is I apologize to urban planners for my office, and that's where I do my writing. I did my writing for Everything's Trash there. I did my writing for Charlemagne the God there. I do like, it's just a really good space. I wish it were a little bit wider. I do feel like I'm in Star Wars in the trash compactor, and like the walls are caving in on me.
Well, as long as you have a space, I think that matters. And you're clearly doing a lot of good work in it. And you always have. I mean, I remember when I was the warm-up comedian at Colbert and they cast you as his, I guess, black friend?
Black friend. That's true. That's how I got my start, man.
And I started seeing you there, and I was like, "This is great." I was so happy that you were doing that you got cast for that, because it's such a big show. But I wanted to ask you about that. I'm sure you've been asked about that a lot in interviews. But since I worked there, I always thought it was really interesting that they did that. But how do you look back and see that role that you played on that iconic show, and what did you hear about it then? Do you still hear about it?
Yes, I still hear about it. I feel like I was just dumb lucky. Like my friend Frank Lesser, who's an amazing writer, he
Love
began.
Frank.
You know Frank. Okay,
sure.
Cool. Yeah, so Frank was there from the beginning at Colbert, and he just called me up one day in about 2005 it was, and he was like, "What are you doing right now?" It's like, I am unemployed and doing nothing. So because I just quit in advertising. I was a copywriter for many years, and I saved up $5,000, Pete, and then I was like, I'm out of here, and it didn't work out. It didn't work out well. My plan didn't work out well, so I was a Vail. So I went to Midtown to 54th and like 11th. I think that's where the studio was, of course. And just posed for this picture with Stephen Colbert. I didn't know what I had no context or anything like that, and then suddenly it's on the show that night. And then my phone blows up. Like, that's as close to going viral as you could back in 2005. Yeah. So that launched everything. They had me back 2, 3, probably like 3 times. And after that, my manager started picking up the phone. My agent started picking up the phone. And like, I started booking things more often. So I think that experience, like, I'll always be grateful for that experience, and just like, and it helped me. I know like Kumail Nanjiani, like he was also cast on the show. So it's like, it was a very good starting place. It was just a good starting place just to say like, okay, this person books, they know how to handle themselves on camera. Yeah. And it was otherworldly. It was really otherworldly. And most of it was a blur. I think the things I did early were like a blur. Like I can't like it's good that you're a little dumb at the beginning. Yeah. Because you don't overthink it. You just do it, That's
great. I like that perspective of it. Before I go on to what happened next in your career, which I mean, I think was Larry Wilmore, when I want to talk about working with him, he was just here on the show with me, and he's such a great guy. But I wanted to ask you about just like growing up. Like, you grew up like only black kid in a white school, and you went to like private school, and you went to Brown. You're an Ivy League grad, and then you pursue a career in the arts. That is always a really interesting thing to talk about. But talk to me about your childhood. Where did you grow up, and what was childhood like?
Sure. I had a very sweet childhood. It was everything I wanted was there for me. Wasn't not a lot of struggle. So I had to, it was almost like, those people that do like Spartan games and things like that in order to find struggle. So I came to New York City. I would have been fine. I would have had a really good and like cushy life in Dallas, Texas, where people love to shop and eat and shop. And I would have had that had I stayed, but it just, I love Dallas, but like, there's no give and take. You have to get out of there. There's no culture really. So I left. And when I was a kid though, my mother exposed me to the arts, and she exposed me to comedy. She's a huge comedy nerd. She loves British comedies, which is insane. She loves like Fawlty Towers. Yeah. Monty Python, all that. And then she had all these comedy albums. She had like Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, canceled, and all these other people. And like, she exposed me to all these comedians, like Jerry Clower, who's like a very famous Southern comic. And like, it was through her, like just her exposing us to comedy. Lucille Ball, doesn't matter, whoever. That's how I got like my first kind of like taste for comedy, and seeing like the metrics of making people laugh. Like I did improv in high school. I remember I didn't make it in the 9th grade. That was that. And now look at me now. Okay, Pete, look at me now.
You're like the Michael Jordan of comedy. He got cut when he was tried out for the basketball team, and then he became the greatest ever. And you got cut from the improv team, and look at you now.
You look at me now. I grew 6 inches over a summer.
What did your parents do?
My dad is retired now. He was an OBGYN. And my mother was an English professor at a community college in Dallas called Brookhaven, up with the people. So they were Democrats in a deeply red place, but they taught us to get along with others, to lead with humor, and to always be polite. It's my brand. And when I got up to Brown, they were like, you're probably going to get a degree in business or something like that, right? And I did. But then I had to break it to my parents. I just wanted to do comedy. And that, oh my God, my dad needed like a triple bypass after that. It was just like really bad. He's just like, you're taking a Brown education and making fart jokes. Why, God? So
what do they think? What do they think now? I mean, you've had so much success in a lot of different areas of, entertainment.
Yeah.
Are they happy, or they still think that you're going to go do something different?
I still don't have their respect, Pete.
Come on.
After all these years. No, I'm kidding. Once you make it onto the TV, everything is forgiven. Once I made it onto Colbert, everything was forgiven. They could tell people at church. They could tell people at brunch. That's what it is. You just want to make sure that your kid gets to that next stepping stone. That's all, And I get it. It wasn't a calculated risk. It was a huge gamble, So like my parents just like, once they started coming to shows and seeing that I could actually make a crowd laugh, then that was great. My dad actually heckled me once. He was just so excited that he heckled me, and they still talk about it to this day. But like,
what did he say? Did he really? He yelled something.
He did. I can't remember what it was, but he just talked. I don't know if you can curse on this, but he just talked shit. And I was like, Pops, please, just sit down before you break your hip. And
your dad was an OBGYN. That's weird. Yeah. Right? That must have been weird as a kid when you realized what he did as a doctor. Was that something that you
I didn't know from anything, right? So like if your father is an OBGYN, then and that's all you know, it's not strange until the kids at school tell you that it's strange. He says, they're like, your dad just looks at vaginas all day.
Right.
And which is that's not all he does. That's not all he does.
He deliver babies, right?
Thank you very much. Yes, Pete, You deliver babies, and which made me, he's a night owl. And then I got that from him. I'm a night owl. You know what I'm saying? So
did he ever leave you when you were doing something with him to deliver a baby? You're like, oh, we're out here fishing. And he's like, sorry, Jordan, my beeper went off. I have to go deliver a baby. But you understood, because it's not like he's going on, he's going to bring a new life in. And you're like, it's okay, Dad, we can fish some other time. Right now, you have to bring a life into the world.
No, whenever he'd leave, I'd just throw in Cats in the Cradle. And then that would always, it was cool. I mean, listen, when your dad is the doctor, then we would, he's always called away. Like, I remember we went, I was a big camper as a kid. I was a Boy Scout. So we went camping, and this kid, you can, I guess, edit it out. His name's Ian Dempsey Corbett. He got hit in the head with a paddle by Lee Harrington. That guy, Lee Harrington. Anyway, so he gets hit in the head with the paddle. And I remember this so well because my dad and I were enjoying going down. It was it the San Marcos River right outside of Austin. And we're having this father and son moment. I finally have my father to myself because we're in a family of 3. I'm the middle kid and I never get dad time. And then I hear like this scream, and it's, and we paddle towards the scream, and it's a kid, his head's fucking busted open. And so they're like, is there a doctor in the house? And my dad is the doctor, and my dad has to take this kid away. And I don't see my dad for the rest of the weekend because it's, so then my dad's like, you never heard the back end of that story. I take this little white kid bleeding from the head to a tiny Texas Ponderosa clinic. And they're like, what's going on here, man? Do
you know this man? We've got a kidnapping in progress. Wow, that's a fascinating. I'm so glad I asked about that one.
I'll never get time with my dad, but it would be great. One of these days I will. One of these days.
So then, what Brown University, what's it like to attend in Ivy League school? Is it in Providence, Rhode Island?
It's in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a lovely school. That school was, listen, my experience was I loved the electives. If the electives could have been the whole thing, that would have been great. Also, the academics were great, but it's a free for all. You can make up your own major, of course. And there are no prerequisites except for if you're taking a certain like concentration, or they call them concentrations, majors. We're different. Everything's going to be different. So if in a certain major, then you have to take certain classes, but there is no curriculum, a core curriculum at all, like in other colleges. And it was, you were on your own and you figured out what you wanted to do and what you did not want to do. So there was a lot of experimentation. I would say it's good for like self-starters, and not great for people that do well with a core curriculum. And but what it did offer was creativity, creative space, art all the time, making crap, just like putting on shows. And that's what was.
But isn't it? What is it like to go to an Ivy League school? Because you're with a bunch of other Ivy League kids, and they're all like cream of the crop, and it's a cream of the crop school. And isn't it different? Isn't like it culturally different? Don't you think? Matt, I'm not even saying that you think you're better, but don't you think you have a pretty good shot, at life just because you're going to get a degree from Brown? Don't you think things will probably work out better for you? And everybody thinks that. And so there's got to be some kind of I don't know. I just have no idea.
That's what they told us when we left. But, I think it's yes, it's like being a comic. You get like your Seinfeld, as Seinfeld says, you get 5 seconds. Like it feels like you get a head start of 5 seconds.
Right.
But after that, there's more to do. And by the way, Brown is not the top of the Ivy League. There's Harvard, there's Yale.
Yeah, but it's still one of the top 12 universities in America. I mean, like if you have that degree, like if you wanted to get out of entertainment and do just about anything, people would be like, well, you did go to Brown.
It's true. I mean, listen, anytime you mess up, people will be like, didn't you go to an Ivy League school? Or if you mess up spelling a word or anything like that, or mess up grammar, which is, obviously the tool of the oppressor, then if you mess that up, then people want to like pull your Ivy card. It did definitely give me confidence. It gave me confidence in what I was doing. But then at the same time, I chose, and I think I stumbled on this. I chose a profession where none of that really mattered. None of that really, really mattered, except for only lately. Lately, that happened like one time. This person that went to Brown hired me.
Oh, wow.
Or it felt like they felt more comfortable with me because I went to Brown. But that was like the only time. My first job. No, I'm lying, Pete. I'm lying. You're right. It's been there all this time. It's been the other pair of footprints.
I mean, if I would be wearing it, I would never take off my brown hat and sweatshirt if I went to Brown.
Well, as a black man, it's
even more. I would even like.
I literally wear a shirt that just says Brown, and people are like, I know. Like it's.
I also think it's weird that you dress up. That you're currently wearing a UPS outfit. I don't know what. I wasn't going to say anything, Jordan, but I didn't want to.
It was cool. You went to school with some very smart people, and what it did was like it humanized smart, top of the top kind of people to me, and showed me that they were not to be afraid of, and that I could actually hold.
But don't you
with them?
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought, but don't you also have like this network too? I mean, they're all from not all, but a lot of people are from families, and I mean, it matters. Yes. Having a network is everything, especially in entertainment, much less finance or any other industry that you're in. And I would just think that you have that network the rest of your life. And to some extent, that's what you're paying for with any college. I mean, I'm thinking about all this stuff a lot, partially why I'm asking, because my daughter is going to, go off to college next year and is not listening to me about the Marine Corps. Won't do it. She wants to go to college. But what about the network?
Well, I feel like, Marine Corps, that's great. Listen, we all want our kids to go to Parris Island. But I do think that what Brown did offer, of course, yes, you do make your friends at Brown, but I would say that I would have loved a bit more social capital. It felt like when I got out, there is an alumni network and everything like that. And yes, we do tend to talk a bit, but I think at Brown, there's a bit of an individualistic kind of thing going on, more so than like, say, Harvard or anything like that. People do reach out to me. I get back to them, young ones starting out, try to have coffees, try to do like, brain picking sessions and things like that. Yeah. But I do feel like the network, I see other schools and I'm like, man, that network is strong. The brand is really strong there. I did, however, do a film. I remember I went to school with John Krasinski of The Office.
Oh, I love that guy.
Yes, yes. So he was in the other comedy group, and over after college, I cast him in a film of mine, like his indie film that never saw the light of day. But like, if he wants to pay me to not release it, that's totally fine. He can reach me at George, at IG. Just DM me, John. All right. So anyway, the thing is, like, that was cool. People that you were doing things with and making things with, we tended to band together, right? And there's still people to this day that I still like. I'm cool with people like Chris Hayes or John or David Walton, an actor out in Hollywood, or Jake Ruther. These are just like the homies. But I feel like it's different in some schools with like, oh, like you went to Harvard, so like, here you go, like that kind of thing.
Well,
it's
all fascinating to the rest of us who didn't go to any of those schools, and it must be all of what you just said and more. And I could talk to you about it forever. I really am interested. I about networks and what colleges you go to and why it matters. And now all I want to do is ask you what John Krasinski smells like. I think he's fantastic.
John Krasinski definitely smelled of a kind of like a peat. You're peat, that's good.
A peat moss.
Peat moss, right? He kind of like a boggy peat moss, but in a good way, like a spruce. If you take spruce and peat together.
Oh, he just got better. So let's talk about you're Black. What do you like? I feel.
Yes.
You've talked about this forever. You're very open about like racial identity and all that. You grew up in a white, an affluent home and all that, and you're in entertainment and you live in America, and just it's a really interesting life that you've lived. As I think it's always interesting when a person grows up in a community that they don't look like. That's always an interesting story. I don't care what you are, but what has your journey been like? Like, not how do you identify, but how often does it come up? How often do you think about race in your life?
I think about it, it's in the frontish part of my brain, because I live like, the place I live in Brooklyn it's a white neighborhood as well. And so like even walking my dog, things like that, like just small interactions. How is this person going to deal with me? This, that, and the third. I do feel as though I am set up I should be a conservative. I should definitely be like a neocon conservative, but I'm not.
Can I make a generalization about Black conservatives?
Go for it. I think you're going to do it anyway. No, you can't.
Well, there's a lot of times I feel like, I mean, again, this is a generalization, but a lot of the ones that I know, I guess I should say, I know them because they're in media or something, but like a guy like David Webb, who I used to work with at Sirius, and others, like they're often, they just are a little bit, they had it better. Their parents, had more money. They come from more affluent. It's often the case, I feel like. And so they don't, to some extent, have as much of a relationship to a certain kind of struggle. That's what I find a lot of times with Black conservatives. Certainly, there are Black conservatives that grew up very poor and they overcame those obstacles, and they think every other Black person should too, i.e., I think Clarence Thomas or somebody like that. But I mean, I generalize a little bit about just where you grew up and what you had to overcome or maybe didn't have to overcome. And I'm done now, and you can tell me that makes no sense.
No. Like my dad had a really rough upbringing. Like his father was he was a gangster. And they lost all their money because of like tax, tax evasion and things like that. So the government came for him, and he didn't pay his taxes. So they lost everything. Like my dad used to have like a maid and a butler and things like that, and then he had nothing. So then my dad was like working in like the Ford car plants in Detroit, like making his way through school to become a doctor, survived like the Detroit riots, and the guy still like so that was his upbringing, right? And so my upbringing was a lot more comfortable,
right?
And when you're exposed, I think to affluence and to money and things like that, you start to actually believe there's an essentialism about you that's like you're the talented 10th. You are different from your brothers and sisters out there, and there's a definitely an invitation, I think, unspoken, to turn your back on some Black people or to become self-hating and things like that. And I think for a long time I mulled it, but in the end, what I felt was I had a deep and visceral like fear, a learned fear of other Black people. because my white friends would be like, oh, you're going to church down on the South Side. So like, you got to be careful. You can get shot. My white friends would say that. So then I adopted that. And so what I did basically was, okay, working for Larry, that was the start of the process,
Oh, really? Working for Larry Wilmore at the nightly show on Comedy Central. That was the start of what process? How would you describe that process?
I would say the process was just like believing that my own people were worthy of working with, and believing that that Black people had something to say and they were worth my Ivy League education. Right. So that was like really cool. I loved that. I loved that feeling. It was uneasy at first. It wasn't easy for me because my friends wouldn't watch the things that I was on. My white friends weren't always aware of what I was doing. Right. So like I did that. And then I kind of like, okay, so after that, I in my next breath, I'm like, then I worked for Sarah Jessica Parker. So that I wrote for her on a show called Divorce, which I'm very grateful for that experience. But it taught me all the more because I was the only Black person. Again, I went from a multi-ethnic room and multi-political room, which I really liked, to a room that was just all white and all liberal and older than me. So that was that experience. And that kind of like, that made me think like, okay, heretofore, I'm just going to aim for shows where it's like people of color and see what that feels like. So then I wrote for Charlemagne the God in 2017, which was so fun and fantastic. And then after that, I started working for Tracy Oliver, who wrote a movie called Girls Trip, which was the movie that launched Tiffany Haddish. So I wrote for her on a show called First Wives Club, which was a reboot of the movie from the 90s. Now, that show was so special and key to me because it was all Black women in this room writing, and I was the only man. And it was like, it was layer on layer, and I just learned so much. And I felt like, in a way, like I felt like I didn't have a place among Black people. But when I went, it's almost like a family reunion. When I go to my family reunion, yeah, my family's like the wonky, kind of liberal family or whatever. But you know what? We're welcome, so it doesn't really matter.
When you go to your family reunion, it's all Black and you're considered the liberal, smart, wonky, whatever.
Outliers, the outliers. And that's okay. That's okay because we're still family and we love each other,
Oh, Jordan, that's really interesting and confusing. It sounds confusing. It sounds like, later in life, even you kind of shifted gears. I mean, listen, you grew up, yes, in a Black family, but in a white neighborhood and community. Yes. And what it sounds like you're saying to me is so you gravitated more towards white folks and white culture, whatever that is. And then later on in life, you're like, you know what? I think I would like to gravitate more towards Black projects and Black staff projects and get more into that. And I think that's so unique and interesting to explore and talk about. I mean,
it's a lot of, one day I hope to write a book about it, but like, I feel like when you're the token kid, you often assume certain approval matrices, right? Like, so I wanted the white approval and I was doing my utmost to get on like an all white show or whatever it was, because I thought this is like the mainstream and this is what I need. But ever since I kind of like upended that for myself, it's not for everybody, but for myself, I noticed I never stopped working. And I feel a lot better about the work that I do. And it's like, it's crazy, man. It's really, it's hard to describe exactly what that feeling is. It could be that also time and society have caught up with, writers of color, things like that. But it felt like the best move and it was worth exploring. Cause like after that, so after like writing on this show on First Wives Club, I then was, hired to act in it. Then I, basically somewhere in that time period, I had started my podcast with Michelle Buteau, a Black woman, one of my best friends, but making these kind of like, I remember being so afraid at first to kind of reach out and have her be my friend, and because I thought we'd have nothing to talk about, but we won't shut up, and so I think it's just worth it. It's worth it. I think, like for you, you're deciding where your child wants to go to school. Yeah. Right. Like maybe, like my wife went to Smith, and going to Smith to an all women's college was great for her because she just got confidence, and because there was no like male gaze or anything like that around. Like I felt like there was a part of me that I had never unpacked before. And that, that suburban, kid from Dallas would always be there, but why not tend to this other part of myself and cultivate that and see what that's like and where that will get me.
I love all of that. It's an interesting and unique story. What about like just digging into literature and history and learning about the Black experience, the Black struggle in America? Did you go down those paths? I feel like a lot of, again, yes. I'm out of my lane here, but I feel like a lot of Black folks, much less white folks, will read, the biography of Malcolm X or Uncle Tom's Cabin or something, and then they'll want more of that. And then in my case, you start watching old Dick Cavett interviews with Jimi Hendrix,
Dick Cavett interviews,
and Muhammad Ali.
His back and forth is so good that no matter who he's talking to, Jimi Hendrix interview was great.
Well, that's where James Baldwin. That's where I first discovered James Baldwin was on Dick Cavett, or watching old Dick Cavett. Anyway, what did you? Is that a thing that you did? The history,
Absolutely. To go back and to see, our worth. I mean, I have James Baldwin on the shelf like right now. Read The Fire Next Time, or like I remember watching not so long ago his debate with William F. Buckley at Oxford, and just like seeing that that video, how that made me feel, or watching enough docs like and keeping up and making sure that muscle is kind of like is toned is like really important, man. Because I feel like it's important to have, of course, a knowledge of self. And yes, I definitely try to go back as much as I can, not only to have to read up on lit and those kind of things, but also have like lived experiences, right? Like my mom and I just went to like the Ebony Power 100. It was like the Ebony Power 100 ceremony where they were giving out awards to great achievers, and those they felt exhibited Black excellence. So that was really cool. It was like it was just nothing but Black folks in the room. It was like they gave an award to Spike Lee for a lifetime achievement, one to Quinta Brunson, one to Issa Rae, on and on. They had the cast of Black Panther, but I also met like a Black nuclear physicist, and I was like, I want you to talk to my daughter, so that my daughter, because I was like, this lady was literally Ada Twist scientist, and it's important that we don't feel alone, because we feel when we feel alone, we think, this isolation, that we are different from the rest, and that we belong to this other group as a special case, So I think that you do yourself a disservice if you isolate. You can't, you can't 100%. I don't want to like 100% like cut myself off from my friends in the past and whatever else it is, but I just do think that there's a lot more growing to do for me. And yeah, for sure.
And for your kids, for your kids too. I mean, it's really interesting to just, I always love talking about parenting. Yeah. And by the way, I took my mom to the White Excellence Awards. Called the
White Excellence Awards? Was it the Heritage Foundation Awards? I think.
No, it was actually the Oscars, but we can take that joke over if we want for like another hour. You sold out and married a white woman, and so your kids are mixed, and you're raising them. You said in a white neighborhood, but it's New York City. They're around a lot of diversity. You talked about having your daughter, see role models that might look like her. I think it's so important as a parent to do all of that. But there are, how much do you think about that? How much do you and your wife talk about cultural issues, history, past? How much? Your kids are 9 and 5. Your daughter's 9. Your son's 5, I think. So I'm not sure that they're even, especially living in New York City, running into too much of that. But I mean, is it something that you and your wife have to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that we've taught is like it's culture, not color, right? So, like my son, for instance, blonde hair, hazel eyes. Doesn't, and just doesn't look like he's mine though. We took the test and it's totally fine. But like,
well, no, I'm looking at a picture of the four of you. Actually, it's a really nice picture of you and your family that I think you posted on Facebook. And he's lighter, much lighter than you, but he has your face. Like there's no doubt he's yours. Yeah. Which has got to be a burden for him.
The tone was like, he's got your face, bud.
Well, if you ever want to know what Jordan looked like if he was much lighter, meet his son.
There'll be a public viewing pretty soon. We're gonna have be a nice panel where you get to meet.
And let me just say this one more time to be inappropriate. Your wife is stunningly beautiful. But go ahead. What you were talking about something thoughtful about.
We did good. Your wife is stunningly beautiful.
Yes,
you have a beautiful, beautiful family.
Yeah, quite a mismatch.
For God's sakes. this is what it was all an elaborate ruse to get me to compliment your family.
Yeah. No, you're talking about culture, not color. And I think I may have jumped in there and talked.
We talk about culture, not color. And he likes to say, like, Dad, because he's 5. He's like, Dad, I'm Black culture, right? I'm like, sure. He goes, well, I'm like Black culture. I'm like, yeah, all right, buddy. So he has all these little books, right? Like, just like Great African Americans A to Z, and and books that his grandmother sends him, and that we get for him, and that my daughter has to say that, like, listen, you are this and you are that as well. Like, my wife is both. She's multi-ethnic as well. She's was born Jewish, and her mother is like Scotch Irish. So that was a mix as well. That's 2 different cultures coming together. Sure. Right. So like she knows from that, and she knows from people thinking she's one thing when culturally she is another. She's culturally Jewish, and you see her and you think she's not. So like, I think like her having that experience is like really cool. And moreover, what we do with the kids is make sure that they understand that plurality is a good thing, and that, like, I mean, his best friends at school, he goes to a school that's like a heavy Asian school, and there's Russians and who are, they're Asian too. But the point is that he's exposed to so much, and so is she. They go to the same school. And I love that. That was not my experience when I was a kid. When I was a kid, it was black or white, maybe a Latinx person here and there, Mexican person here and there. That's about it, So it was I really appreciate the experiences they're getting in New York, man. They're cultured. They're New York kids.
Yeah, no, it sounds like they're going to be set up to understand a whole bunch of different things about life, and I think it gives you a real head start in so many different ways. But
it can get spooky though. I mean, my son asked if I was going to jail because he'd seen images of like black men going to jail, and he was like, his daddy going to jail too. And I was like, I'm going to pay those taxes. It's going to be fine, and I'll settle with the government.
You put your hand on his shoulder, looked at him, and said, "Eventually." Anyway,
they'll all get us, man.
It's inevitable. Anyway, read your Steve Bannon book for children.
G6 for you. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because you talk about the books that you give your kids. Yes. And now we are having this conversation in America about books that you give your kids, books that are available to kids, and what's appropriate and what's not. And most, I think, parents who are educated and thoughtful, they read to their kids, they give their books their kids certain kinds of books like you're talking about to give them the experience and a perspective that they might not get just from life. They definitely won't. And now we're seeing, books being banned, especially when it comes to people who have different sexual orientations. And I'm not even talking about trans. I'm talking about like gay, lesbian, ban those books, much less sex in general. Get rid of any book that depicts sex. And going back to what you said about, feeling alone, whether you're an adult or whether you're a kid, if you are different, that's what the book is for. The book is for the kid who feels different because there's no one like him. And yet, what are we doing, Jordan, with these book bans? What are your thoughts on all that?
Good question. Great question. I will say this. Black people were always built for it. We are the cockroaches of society. If a nuclear bomb goes off, we're ready. We're going to survive. We never got our books at the library. Our books were circulated among each other. We knew that there would be censorship in a library, right? So we have a tradition. This is not new to me as a black man. My history, the history that of like our people was learned at home, right? It wasn't learned in very little of it was learned at my school, right? So I think it's really, I think that the public square is under threat. But I think that you can learn a lot from marginalized people and how they've carried on their traditions by like, okay, if you want to try to control the marginalized square, you cannot, the public square, you cannot control what I do in my home or how I communicate within my community. I know that's a fact. That's something that we had to do. We had to go underground, man. We had to go underground with our books, with our thoughts, with everything. Like we knew the truth of I'm a Gen X kid. We knew the truth behind like George Washington, that he owned slaves. We knew the founding fathers did that. Yeah. Right. But we didn't say it out loud in school because that narrative would have like harshed the mellow of my fellow students. Right. But we knew it at home. And now that now that this new generation has a bit more gusto, which I appreciate, and bravado, and they're going to go out and speak the truths, you get that pushback from, I think that, from the status quo, because that's the hardest thing to change, right? Is the status quo. And they'll push back all the more, because anytime you try to correct something, there will be an overcorrection. Right?
Yes.
So if you have Reconstruction, then you have that nadir, right? Where it's like from 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson all the way to 1965, people are living in darkness because somebody just wanted equality, right? So it's like that threat is too much for some people.
I hate it so much. It's so.
I think you put it better than I did, Pete. Like I'm trying to like give the Howard Zinn answer, and you're like, I hate him so much.
No, I hate. I just. You commenting on that period of time and the Supreme Court decisions and culture, and obviously bringing it up to the Voting Rights Act, and it just, I guess, Jordan, I really thought that was history. And to see that now we have to be the ones to step up again and fight for a kind of civil rights that some people might argue is even worse than then. Certainly when it comes to like walking back abortion, this is worse than it was in the 70s now. You know, I mean, much less racial justice. It's crazy to think that we're in this place, because I thought we had moved on, but that night in 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost and Donald Trump won, I mean, we were getting there. Obviously, it was getting ugly and bad in many different ways. But man, I guess I was just so shocked. I was so shocked. And Trump has given cover to so many other people who have given cover. And now it's just so out there. And we're in such a dangerous place. And I just hate it so much. I didn't think that we would be in this place, much less that our kids, your kids, even younger than mine, would be growing up. And I guess I don't have any answers or solutions. It's just so shocking in many ways. Maybe it shouldn't be.
Nor do I. I mean, like, nor did I think that we'd be in this place either. But I think it's important to confront that reality, to know that, yes, I mean, you and I was born in 78. So
yeah, I'm 3 years older than you.
Right. Okay. So like we were both like post Cold War, kind of like those were teenage years and things like that. And I feel as though in that time, we naively thought that there'd be this kind of like evolution of thought and reason, and that there'd be no going backwards. But, I think that Barack Obama, for a lot of people, was the Reconstruction president, and like, I remember I used to be friends with this kid, Pinchback was his name, and was the last name. And he was the great-great-great-grandson of P.B. Pinchback, who was the first black governor of Louisiana during Reconstruction. P.B. Pinchback, when they found out that he was actually black, they ran him out on a rail, and it basically reversed course for the state of Louisiana, who started to dismantle all these kind of like gains that had come about in Reconstruction. That was the beginning of the end in Louisiana, the kind of the darkening there. So I think that, like, when you say they found out he was black, I'm just looking it up because he looked white passing. Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So
it made it sound like he was like a black guy. They're like, wait a second, he's nobody knew. But yeah, he was like a lot of people back then. I mean, he looked anyway. So go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think what we have is something similar to that in Obama. I think Obama definitely, it jolted a lot of people and made them think that if this happens once, then it will never, this will be it for the rest of our lives.
Right.
Then we'll have a woman. Then it's like, then we'll have a gay president. And what's going to happen to me? It's all about, this thought that some sectors feel, some demos feel that their very existence will be criminalized, right? So I've heard people say that, like, there's like, pretty soon being a straight white male is going to be illegal, because that is replacement theory. And I think that the fear of replacement, the fear of white primacy is what drives a lot of people. And there also are agents of white primacy. And they're also, there's, like I said at the beginning of this, accepting the invitation to become conservative, whatever you want to call it, and to take this tokenism, right? You're never surrounded. I mean, like, if you think about like the people like Herschel Walker, you think about people like Candace Owens, on and on, these folks, even though they're media types, and some political, they're always alone. They're always alone. They're always alone in a sea of whiteness. They're never with their brothers and sisters. And the excuse that they will make, or the reason that they will give, is because Black people are brainwashed. Right.
Right.
But I mean, I think numbers matter. Numbers matter.
I think Black people
are all be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't think Black people are brainwashed by like the idea there is that Black people are brainwashed by democratic politics and by being given government handouts and all that bullshit. I think Black people are brainwashed the way that everybody's brainwashed of any culture, in that their life experience is their brainwash. Like, the reason I feel the way I feel is because I've been Black my whole life and I've had this experience. And for that reason, I feel this way about government policies, about politics, about people, about white folks, about Black folks, about men and women. It's like, that's my life experience. And it's not monolithic, obviously. And you always have to say that, but it's, the vast majority of Black folks in America had some overlapping experience, or do daily, is my understanding.
Yes. And a lot of people, if you're born of privilege, Black, conservative, you have the option, you can opt in and out sometimes, because like you don't always feel the burden of being criminalized. And then you can start to like judge your own, and not speak for your own, because white people have the advantage of not having to speak for themselves as a group. Right. And for Black people, you can they're like, let me ask a Black guy, as an ambassador to your race, it's like, it's a thing, it's a thing. Yeah. You can have a press conference with a Black person about their experience or Black people in general. And I do feel as though, what is ultimately coming is that, I don't know. I feel like there's a breaking point where you cannot be an agent of racism, and you cannot, throw in and accept the values of your oppressor for better treatment on a long enough timeline, because you will not be pure enough. You will not, the purity test, you'll fail it eventually. Eventually someone will say something to you on a long enough timeline, as if you're a Black person, and you'll take umbrage to it, or, it doesn't matter. And you'll find yourself alone, and you'll find yourself without a people to back you up. And that really scared me. And I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I want my friends to be people of color. I want them to be Black. I want a network of a vast array of people.
Well, you've got it now. I mean, just to that's really interesting. I just want to give credit to everything you just said. I was obviously listening, and I think it's really important what you're saying. And I think your experience is really important to share. And I'm so glad that we're talking today, because it's very original. It's very valuable. And you're so, really honest and vulnerable and clear, I think, talking about what you've learned and where you're at right now in your life and in your career. You're working on Everything's Trash and adulting, and you're around a lot of Black folks, a lot of different backgrounds. And it's really, I think it's all the stuff that you're doing and all the content that you're involved with for the last several years of your career has been really impactful too, to large groups of people that maybe didn't have that kind of content. And I just want to know, here at the end, first of all, Everything's Trash is about a woman who's a podcast star navigating her messy but amazing life. I'm reading from...
Very well said.
When her brother Jaden emerges as a leading politician, she's forced to grow up, so she relies on her friends and family to help her figure out adulthood. And you are in it, you write it. What are your roles in it, and what do you think? How has this show been received? And I mean, it's ABC,
been received
right?
Very well. It's been received very well, critically really well, 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I was super happy about. I got to write and act in it. I played Jaden, her brother. So real quick, basically me and Phoebe have been brother sisters for years, and just in comedy. And so we had that rapport, we had that chemistry, and it was just so nice to kind of bring it to screen. And by the way, to help this person bring their dream to life was amazing. So that process is really cool. It was actually really great also to play a politician in 2022 and to see what that was like. It's New York City politics, so it's a little bit different.
Right.
local politics, but nonetheless, it was cool. We have a canvassing episode. We have a scene where it's like, I can't beat the incumbent because I'm not a good candidate. There are people that will make great civil servants, but they are not good candidates. And we wanted to make that distinction. And like we played that up and it was really fun.
That's true. It's very true. That's a good storyline and narrative.
Oh, God, right? That they can never win an election. But
yeah.
But if you just put them in, they're great appointees. They're great.
Really smart policy analysts and moral clarity and everything, but you put them in front of a camera or a group of people and they're just not charismatic. I see it all the time. Yeah.
Absolutely. The Adlai Stevensons of the world. All right. So I do think that that was so great. I mean, it's like one of the high watermarks of my career. And I also love working with Michelle and doing the podcast with her. We've had so many great guests and we're just trying to figure out this world. And I love it because it's almost like, it's like a happy hour, and people just, they admit to what's going on with them and we kind of relate to each other and try to give them horrible advice. It starts off pretty strong and then just goes really bad. And I don't know, for some reason the formula works and we just end up laughing and joking. So it's cool. So I've been doing that, man. But I wanted to come back to you. I want to circle back for a moment about affirmative action because you've got your daughter's applying to school. And the thing about it is, it's so interesting. What the Supreme Court is deciding on, as you well know, is whether the holistic approach and whether like race can play in as a factor to the grab bag of reasons that you accept or deny a student. But what's really freaking interesting to me, and I read this book by David Golden called The Price of Admission. Have you read this? So good.
No.
Please look it up. David Golden is, again, he's an authority on the subject, but not great on camera. So basically, he talks about all the other affirmative action programs out there that are, those are validated, but race is not, right? So whether it's like if you're a legacy, like he says in the book that 1 in 4 students at Notre Dame, 1 in 4, their parents went to Notre Dame. That's insane and it does bring down the academic standards of the school. So you got that. You've got Brown University loves, please Brown, don't cancel me, but Brown University loves the children of celebrities. If you are a celebrity and your child applies, you've got that much of a better shot because
that's probably true of every single school. Anybody who's a well-known child's going to bring attention, right?
A well-known child, the child of a powerful elected official, right? So a politician, yes, well-known child of a politician or a sports an athlete, whatever.
Do you think I'm well-known enough to affect my daughter's acceptance into what level school is my celebrity, is my fame? Would you say, Jordan? Is it like, are we DeVry, University of Phoenix Online? Are we SUNY? Are we SUNY?
You do not do that to yourself, Pete Dominic. You give a speech and you never know. Listen, here's what happened at my school. I was like, oh, David Mamet is showing up. He's giving a speech. David Mamet showed up, gave a speech. Next year, his daughter's in the school. And I was like, who else? Danny DeVito showed up and gave a speech. Next year, his daughter's in the school. And then who was it? David Heller, before he passed away, or Joseph Heller, excuse me. Before he passed away, he comes, gives a speech. He was old as hell. He gave a speech and then his grandkid got in. And I was like, so you give a speech and then for free.
Well, I'll give a speech at any university that'll accept my child. I'm just putting it out there right now. Going back to this David Golden's book, though, it's The Price of Admission, How America's Ruling Class Buys Its Way into Elite Colleges and Who Gets Left Outside the Gates. And you're pointing to, obviously, Notre Dame and any of these other schools in terms of legacy. So pick back up on the legacy thread.
I think the legacy thread is this. Like you have a much, much better chance, like especially at the Ivy League schools, if your parents went there, the school itself will put you, that's called a hook, right? So the hook means that you get moved up in the line and you get better consideration.
Right.
So so if your parents went there, if they can donate a lot of money as well, or a building or something like that, that moves up your consideration all the more. My problem is this. We all know this. We all know that this is how it's done. But to scapegoat like black students or brown students as somehow getting, better like better, like a special dispensation when that's just not the case. You need to think about all these other students also that like, listen, if your school, like for instance, Cornell has a polo team. And if you played polo in high school and can afford a horse paddock, which Golden talks about in the book, that can afford you the possibility of going to Cornell. Your grades don't have to be stellar, So
I just thought of it like a funny sketch where a bunch of black guys in the Bronx talking, young black guys, let's say the sketch, talking about polo.
Not the Ralph Lauren kind?
Any water polo or horse polo, either one of them. I think there's a lot of jokes. Like, I feel like it's one guy explaining it to another guy. Like, really? They do? That's what they do?
You get on a horse?
But you're pointing to, you tweeted about this, and I think it's really important. You're saying there's all these other ways for white folks to get in. And in this case, it's all these traditionally white sports that have access to white, from hockey to lacrosse to polo. Those are very, very white sports. And when black folks do play, they tend to take over, unfortunately for us. But I mean, no, but like even like golf or something, or tennis, and all these, you get scholarships to get into school is what I think you're saying, because you're in this club, you're in this family, you have these, and black folks are like, can we just get in without that? Is there any way that we could get accepted without having to play, quote, white sports, or have our parents go, to this college or that college, or donate? By the way, I donated a shed to a State University of New York school in hopes.
Well done. But I think it's also the misconception that there isn't that what happens is these programs are not a form of affirmative action, because it's exactly what they are.
Right.
You're taking people that were born by accident of birth into a group, right, and more readily putting them in the position where they will be accepted. Okay, like that's just what it is. And I think that people have this kind of cognitive dissonance, especially they talk about it in the book, where they're like, well, yes, my grandfather, father, and mom all went to the school, and yes, we gave a science lab, and I could be rock dumb, but I feel that there's something about me that means I should go there, which is tradition, right? And Golden talks about this. He says, and I'll shut up. But the first legacy policy ever implemented was in 1918, I believe, at Columbia University, because at the time, 40% of the incoming class that matriculated was Jewish. And that was a big effing problem at Columbia. So what they did was, just like with voting rights down south, they said, let's institute a grandfather clause, wherein if your parent went here, then you'll have a much easier time being accepted. And that radically changed the number and the demos in the
that's the kind of thing that they're going to have to do if the Supreme Court does decide, which we think they will, that colleges are going to have to come up with all kinds of new ideas and policies to get a diverse group of students. If your grandfather, just whatever, just to get, I don't want to make jokes because they're all going to be like racist or anti-Semitic or whatever, but they're going to have to do these things so that they can affect a certain culture, a certain ethnicity, to make sure that their student bodies are diverse for all the reasons that you and plenty of people, experts have said, is valuable to any institution or any company to have a diverse group of people. But if you can't create those rules through traditional affirmative action policies, you're going to have to come up with new ideas.
Absolutely. And it was crazy to me that, of course, Clarence Thomas, so yesterday he was quoted as saying, when the lawyers for the University of North Carolina kind of like gave their brief, he said in rebuttal, he was like, well, what is diversity anyway? You are diversity. OK, you're the second.
That blew up. That comment from him enraged people. What is diversity? It just was so offensively stupid, I think, in a way, like, or why does it matter? I don't know what he meant. Everybody reacted to that comment. Yeah. Everything
about you, Clarence Thomas, has been because of diversity, has been because of affirmative action. And for you to kick the ladder out because that's what you do once you make the handshake and say, like, there's an essentialism about me, that I am different from the rest of these people. I discard my blackness until it's convenient. Like that is, that's his MO, that's his ethos, and that will wind up, I think the outcome will be that all the more schools will be, they won't represent our national fabric. which will then, I think, correlate to the workplace. It's not, none of it is positive. And I think all the more tears at the thread, not only threads of democracy, but society, when it just becomes the difference between the races as far as like where they are in society, economically, socioeconomically, the stratification becomes that much worse.
Yeah, because then it's not like, black folks are going to give up. They're going to become more insulated, which makes sense to be more safe to create their own, lanes and communities and companies. It's not going to, and it only segregates us more in natural ways that you have to do just to be able to survive. It sucks. It really sucks. But that's why we got to keep the conversation going and keep doing everything we can to fight it. Because there's no ability to give up. I mean, certainly not for you. You married a white woman. You have mixed kids. What are you going to do? You can't go anywhere.
I will say that one of the major fallacies, I think, when you think about diversity, is that it's a net benefit for.
Wait, something just happened on my computer. I hit a button by accident. When people think it's a net benefit for black people, you said?
Yeah, it's not. It's also a net benefit for white people.
Right.
To learn to have like racial intelligence, to understand where other people are coming from, that you do not exist in like this monolith, and to take in other perspectives. Not a bad thing, Otherwise, you become an egotistical maniac who can't listen to some other idea,
Yeah. And same thing with, any other difference, sexual orientation, gender, work with women, work with men, work with gay people, whatever it is. And you just, and there's just so much fear around that. And
not the left-handed, though. The left-handed, they freak me out.
Well, you're talking to one. Oh my God.
And we've gone on this whole time.
Yesterday when I voted, let that sit there for a second. I voted early. Old lady that works at the poll. Are there any other types? She goes, I signed my name, and she's like, she's like, hey, she's like, had a smoking, one of those old people who smokes voice. And you're just like still surprised that they're alive. She's like, oh my God, you're left-handed, huh? The nuns beat that out of me. And I was like,
oh no.
Before I could even say anything, she actually passed away. But it was just so weird to hear someone say such a thing, But I was like, well, you're old.
Dude, you got to say that in your half hour tomorrow.
The nuns beat it out of me.
Before I could say anything.
Yeah, I don't know how much the Mormons will love that joke. Are you allowed to be left-handed as a Latter-day Saint?
I think lately they've been making some changes to the church, and I think that
among other things. Dude, it's so great talking to you. Can we do this more?
Please.
You're so busy and successful and stuff.
I'd love that, man. I'd love that. I love chatting with you, man, and chopping it up. I love looking at your shed and your stacks of books. I feel. See, hold on. Look at that, huh?
Oh, you got a few books in there.
You got some books.
You got some books in there. I like that.
Yeah,
you got more. I feel like you got more plants than books, and I think that says something about you. Thank you very much for joining me, man.
Thanks, man.
All right, there he goes. Comedian Jordan Carlos, everybody. Check him out. JordanCarlosComic.com. Go listen to his podcast with Michelle Buteau, which is very funny. And look him up and let him know that you heard him here on the show as well. If Twitter's still a thing, you can find him at Jordan Carlos. Okay, folks, that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you very much for listening, for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please go now to standupwithpete.com and join us. You can hang out with us on Thursday nights and so much more, so many more benefits. Being a member, a listener of the show, a member of our community, and that is it. That's all I've got for you. Be the change you want to see in the world. I love you guys, and I will talk to you on Monday, if not sooner.
I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know over your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.